this is the part of the conversation where we introduce our guests. And today we have a very, very special guest. It's Professor Toyin Falola. He's a professor of history, a university distinguished teaching professor, and the Jacob and Sanger Massacre Chair in the Humanities at the University of Texas, Austin. Welcome to Lens in Africa, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, great to have you. Okay, so we already hinted you that today's conversation is going to be more of a chat because we intend to have a wide range of issues sorted out in this conversation. I would like to start with how you would rate the U.S. 2024 elections, the campaign specifically, comparing it to our style of campaigning here in Africa.
Well, it's very intense. It's involves a lot of spending money, presentation of policies, presentation of your ideas, and there are differences between the two candidates in relation to appealing for votes. On the side of Trump, it's about America First policies, immigration, is approach. Different approaches, two different strategies, and two different ways of getting the electoral college, which counts more than the popular votes. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
All right, All right, so how would you say the campaign style, and personalities of these candidates, would affect the voting behavior of Africans in the U.S.?
Thank you. Let's start with Donald Trump.
Yes.
So, economic policies make America first. In other words, make deals that will favor American businesses. In that context, there will be less focus on trade agreements with Africa. Second is immigration policies, travel bans, which he did before, restricting several African countries, which he did before, and the tone is do not come here. The third that will affect Africa. Remember during his presidency, some relations were strained because he was making derogatory remarks. And those derogatory remarks were so bad to us.
Okay.
And African countries are dealing with China and Wagner, Russia, is going to be opposed to those two. With respect to Kamala Harris, so he wants a more progressive agenda, diplomatic engagement that could strengthen ties with Africa. He was in Ghana promoting Africa in terms of inclusion.
Okay.
With respect to immigration, the policy of his political party is welcoming. And they are going to talk more about multilateralism, global partnership. Biden is going to Angola before he finishes his presidency. So the differences are very clear. The outcome too are not going to be the same. Thank you for the question.
Okay, sir. I'd like to chip in something there about migration and the concerns that Africans have. Africans are not just the only ones who actually migrate to the U.S., correct? We have Asians and others. So I'd like to ask, should that be enough to tilt vote in favor of Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris? Just the immigration laws that she's proposing? Because she's warmer towards migrants than Trump is. Do you think that's enough to tilt the African community in the U.S. in her favor?
So, if politics is about interest and block voting because of interest, So African Americans tend to vote for Democrats.
Okay.
And African immigrants tend to vote for Democrats. So if you see it that way, the two parties are playing politics, but with different emphasis.
Right.
Trump and the Republicans are saying if for Democrats, and if blacks tend to vote for Democrats, the more you bring more people for Africans from Africa, the more you are getting votes for Democrats. That is basic politics. And the Democratic Party is structured around clusters of different interest groups. Hispanic, Latinos, Latina, black people, and those clusters, their interest must be recognized. But if you throw in conversation in Sweden, in France, in England, you will realize that immigration is a big issue in all Western countries today. A month ago, Sweden announced, if you want to leave the country, I'll give you 35,000 US dollars to do so. The Conservative Party in France said they don't want immigrants anymore. Remember, when Britain left the European Union, it's because of immigration issues, Indians and Africans. So, and in the US, it's also becoming an issue. These have not been resolved, and there are serious problems in the case of the US. First of all, you know, it's a huge continent, but with a small population of 400 million people. The US is just twice the population of Nigeria, with resources 1,000 times over. But they have not resolved what is going to be the optimum population. Second, since the 50s, the economy has been doing so well. The millennia, they did so well that the white people are just reproducing middle class. They have 2 kids. Those 2 kids go to school and they have nice jobs. So who is going to do the menial job? So the US has 2 options. Either you create structural poverty in your country, in which you deliberately manufacture poor people so that you can push them to poor jobs, as in the case of African Americans, 2 million in prison, 5 million incarcerated. Or you open your doors to immigrants that will do the poor jobs for you. Those issues have not been resolved. And what politicians do in all countries is that any issue that you have not resolved, you let it fester. In other words, you refuse to resolve it so that as it festers, you bring it up in the next election. You keep bringing it up so that you use it as a strategy of winning votes. I'm very grateful for that question.
Okay. Now my next question. You already talked about differences in the policies of the Democratic candidate and the Republican Party candidate. Now let's talk about personalities. I mean, you mentioned earlier that former President Donald Trump made some derogatory remarks, you know, a couple of times about Africa, about Nigeria, etc., etc. The people of the U.S., I mean, during this campaign, have also made some observations about some certain comments being made by the current vice president. Where does the personality of a person or of a candidate, how much does it come to play? Let me use that expression. We've talked policy, now we're talking the individual. How much does it affect?
So, whenever a politician is talking and you don't agree with that politician, what it means is that the politician already knows you're not going to vote for him. So he's not addressing you. He's addressing those that will vote for him. Remember, you see the current polls, strong personality and character have not affected his rating. Remember, he lost the last election, but 75 million people voted for him.
Yeah.
And 82 people voted for Biden. And the loss, if you look at Electoral College, if you combine the total loss, it is not up to 100,000 that cost him the presidency. So don't let us exaggerate character issues. Because it's an exaggeration.
Okay.
Why is it that everybody has been saying doesn't affect you?
Right.
It is because he's doing two things. One, those things that sound bad are targeted to consolidate his own base. Like in saying Asians eat cats and rats. That looks so stupid. But it's a strategic comment about immigrants. Instead of saying, I hate people from Haiti, don't vote for them. Look for a dramatic way of saying it. If you say Africans are shitholes countries, it's a racialized statement that he puts in a way to relate to his own people. And if you say, how can you vote for somebody who is being convicted for 34 charges?
Okay.
You find his Christian supporters saying that God can use a bad person to govern a good country in a successful manner.
Okay.
Yes. So what they're fighting for, whether one has good character or bad character, you must realize that what they're fighting for is just a small percentage of independent voters. That's what they're fighting for. So because you have your own 40%, I have my own 40%, because there is no longer landslide in modern election.
Right.
Unless you read an election. In Nigerian election, there was no landslide. They all won 12 states each. So in the American election, you are praying for 51-49. You are praying for 52-48, 53-48. If you do very, very well, 54-46. Because if you slice the electorate, bear in mind that one of two, even as of today, will support one of two candidates. Number two, remember the American Civil War. The South supported slavery and kept slaves. The North said it's less supportive of slavery and did emancipation. That line, since the American Civil War, remains till today. The red state and the blue state. The red states and the blue states, they are consolidated sometimes in a permanent manner. If you put a dog forward in the state of Texas against a human being and the dog is a Republican, the dog is going to win. So they already have their blue states and red states in their pockets.
Okay.
This entire election is just about 6 states. That's it. Where they are neither blue nor red.
Okay.
So they're fighting in a limited number of states. And they are also fighting just for between 5 and 8% of the population. A person like me or like you who say they are not declared. That's what this election is all about. And most of the elections is, how can I target people who are not solidly behind a party? And finally, remember, it's not like the Nigerian election, which is based on popular votes. When Trump defeated Hillary Clinton, Hillary had the popular votes, and Trump had the Electoral College. It is getting to 72 Electoral College that they are fighting for. So those character issues is not going to affect Trump in the state of Texas, and where the Republican states are in red states. Thank you.
Okay, sir. So let's bring it back home to Africa for a bit here. Now, how would you describe the policies of the candidates, in relation to the geopolitics in Africa? For example, under like democracy and human rights. How would these policies affect Africans?
Okay. Very good question. Trump, 2017, 2021, he was president. So we can look at him from what he did as a former president. Harris, vice president. So we can look at her from what Biden did under her leadership. So let's start with Trump. Controversial relationship with Africa and with African Americans. You remember George Floyd, the guy who died.
Yes.
And Trump told the police, do more, do more, do more. So let me break it down for you far more clearly. Under Trump, you should expect that he's going to cut what they call foreign aid.
Okay.
Because he did it before, he cut the aids to USAID. Under him, he launched an alternative, Prosper Africa Initiative in 2018, if you remember.
Yeah.
He said he wanted to double the two-way trade investment between the US and Africa.
Okay.
But that did not yield significant consequences. Remember 2017, travel ban. If 2017, Somalia, Libya, Sudan, I don't want you to come in large numbers. 3 years later, he added your country, Nigeria, Eritrea, Sudan, Tanzania. I want you to reduce the number of visa you granted to those 4 countries. You remember?
Yes.
And you remember Dhaka, that why should you bring your parents? You started your question about his comments. 2018, it is a very, very painful comment. Shit all countries. How can the president of a country call other countries shit all countries?
Okay.
The African Union was angry, I was angry, all of us were angry. What about military engagement, counter-terrorism operations? He tackled some of that. Al-Shabaab in Somalia. He was looking for ways to check Boko Haram in Nigeria, Boko Haram in Chad, Boko Haram in Niger. And he supported the use of drone strikes in Somalia, special operations in Libya. And he reduced the number of US troops in Africa. His relations to some African countries were problematic. He said South Africa must not do land reform, as in that of Zimbabwe. And he said they're killing white farmers. Not true. And the South African government was very, very angry. Very angry. Sudan, well, the Sudanese were happy. He removed them from the list of terrorist sponsors. His relationship to people like me in the African diaspora was not good. He didn't engage us.
Okay.
And his response with respect to COVID as a global crisis was very, very, very bad. Telling us to go and drink chemicals that we use to clean our houses. Trump will fight China in Africa and will fight Wagner in Africa. What about Kamala Harris? Let's start with her record. 2023, March. If you remember, he went to Zambia, she went to Zambia, she went to Tanzania, she went to Ghana. Why? To talk about economic development, governance, and democracy. But he angered people in two countries. Our support for LGBTQ+, even approaching threatening Ghana, that if they pass a bill against gays, there will be consequences. So the anti-gay issues remain from the time of Obama to cause friction, especially with the Anglican Church and conservative people. So that lesbian policy may produce its own tension.
Okay. Wow.
There are issues around different economic initiatives.
Yeah.
The use of soft diplomacy, foreign policy. If there's time, I will explain all of them.
Okay. I don't know if we'll be able to do all of that in today's episode. However, there's a question that I have for you, sir, and that's about African leaders learning anything at all. Yes, we know the elections are still forthcoming. However, we know that at the beginning of the campaigns, if I may use that word, because when the campaigns began, when the whole talk about the next elections began, Joe Biden was running. President Joe Biden was running. And along the line, he stepped down and Kamala Harris, rather, became the candidate. I would like to ask, do you think African leaders have a lesson to learn here about, getting out of the way so that for whatever reason, it's not exactly clear why Joe Biden stepped down. Some people said health, some people said, he wanted to give Kamala a chance. There were different reasons. But do you think African leaders have something to learn here about, getting out of the way?
And I know why you pose that question, because you have Bobia in Cameroon, if you're under 50, is the only president you've known.
Yeah.
And you have 6 of them like that who have refused to him. And I also know why you ask a question. Why do you have leaders who don't deliver development? And I am not a mind reader, but I know you are looking for development, and you have people like Museveni in Uganda. And I know you also have corruption in mind when you pose that question. Why do they steal so much money? So it's not a difficult question to answer.
Okay.
But bear in mind that at one level, politicians are the same everywhere in the world. They have their interest in mind. They will do everything to win the election. And what check politicians is not behavior, as people tend to think in Africa. It is not about whether they behave well. It is about the power of the institutions you have to check them. Can they go to jail? If they can't go to jail, they will be misbehaved. Can you kill them, as in China? They will kill you in China if you steal the amount of money they steal in Nigeria. You're dead. Will the public be so angry if they go back home? In Nigeria, they will welcome you with ashwebi. And if you return home and you kill 10 cows, it will not be enough. And if you go to your church, your priest, your pastor will pray for you. So we have a lot of work to do. As to the differences, campaign strategies are not the same. Because in Nigeria, you have to pay for people to vote for you. You cannot deceive. The market women are not being deceived. The taxi drivers are not being deceived. Okay. They know that once you come to power, you are not going to remember them. So give me the 10,000 naira now, I can make a pot of soup, and I will vote for you. And grassroots mobilization tends to be along ethnicity. I am Yoruba, vote for me. The Igbo own Lagos, the Yoruba own Abraka, those are the Hausa Muslims. the Ijaw people are Christian, we still deal with those issues. So that the political environment is not the same.
Right.
Now, political environments can be volatile, tied to what you want. American elections is not about basic issues any longer. Remember, they are not fighting over water. They are not fighting over
Light.
They are not fighting over electricity.
Yeah.
You see? Look, what they fight over, if you take them to Nigeria, we'll all be smiling. Should I do abortion? Should I do abortion? Should you not do abortion? Whom are you going to tell that in Abuja? You'll be smiling that you are not serious. We are still fighting over basic issues. And those basic issues tie to survival. If I give you 77 naira as a youth corper, or I give you 65,000 as minimum wage, is that enough to get to your office? If you are from Ibadan, you are working in Abuja, is that enough to go and greet your parents? That is what we are fighting over.
That's true.
So that what we are fighting over and what they are fighting over, it is not the same.
Okay.
And the money that politicians are looking for is not the same. The main business in Africa, the most lucrative business in Africa is politics. Become a governor, you are good for the rest of your life. Your children are good for the rest of your life. The money you have stolen is enough for your and great grandkids. So that power is not about transparency. It connects to how much you can make,
Right.
which is a big problem.
Right.
And it connects to ethnic loyalties. What have you done to your people?
Okay.
What do you do for Yoruba people? What do you do for Fulani people? That is how we talk. And these differences we must make clear, bearing in mind that politicians are the same everywhere.
Fundamentally the same. All right. We have actually come to the end of our conversation, but before we let you go, I would like to ask if you have a word of, will I say advice now? Yeah, to other Africans in diaspora, specifically in the U.S., concerning the elections coming up next month in November.
Thank you. Let us not transfer electoral power as we do in Nigeria to the judges. Let us make sure we do elections so that the voice of the people is what counts.
All right.
As far as politicians are concerned now, the judiciary is far more powerful than the voters. And second, let the followers begin to demand accountability and transparency. Democracy without transparency is not going to deliver, and democracy without accountability is not going to deliver. So we have more things to do.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
We've been
you.
speaking with Professor Toyin Falola. He's a professor of history, a university distinguished teaching professor, and the Jacob and Sanger Massacre Chair in the Humanities at the University of Texas, Austin. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
It's my pleasure. Bye-bye now.
All right.
All right.